Paradigm Profiles is called Nuestra Familia, Monterey County Jail Mercenaries. The streets of Salinas has always been astir, bustling with assaults, homicides, and gang-related activity. Gang-related homicides and assaults are a daily commonality, and for a mid-sized agricultural community that's surrounded by artichoke trees and salad fields, the crime rate is astonishing. The Nuestra Familia is a criminal organization that has always had deep roots and a staunch presence in Monterey County, and by some accounts, it's even referred to as the epitome for the NF. Salinas is rich with Nuestra Familia history, and when you think about an area that the NF has always been extremely active and deeply ingrained in, Salinas has got to be in the top 3, if not number 1 itself. The culture out there is a lot different than other Northern California cities, and the homies from the Salad Bowl are just deeper into that gangbang culture. On the streets, up and down East Market, and back down to Chinatown, this area has always been considered to be NF territory. When it comes to the NF street operations, it's highly unusual if there's not an active regiment operating out there. I functioned out there and ran an NF street regiment between 2000 and 2003. It's no secret that the homies out there on the streets are pushing a hard line, but it don't stop there. The Monterey County Jail has always been known as ground zero when it comes to one of the NF strongholds. This profile is about a crew of soldados in the Monterey County Jail and how they were criminally charged for committing several removals. Over the course of the last 20 years, gang intel officers, gang task force agents, and both state and federal prosecutors have become more innovative and creative when it's come to charging and applying some of the gang statutes. The RICO, Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act has always been an effective tool in taking down dozens of gang members in sweeping indictments because it allows prosecution and civil penalties for racketeering activity. In order to convict someone, all they need to do is prove 2 overt acts that the gang engaged in 2 or more instances of racketeering activity, and the accused directly invested in, maintained an interest in, or participated in a criminal enterprise affecting interstate or foreign commerce. The federal government has used the RICO Act on prison gangs and street gangs that have correlations to some of the more organized prison criminal organizations since it passed into law in the 1970s. But these millennial prosecutors are getting more clever and creative with the application of how they're using them to charge some of these criminal organizations. I can think of a few examples of how I've seen them apply 2 other effective gang enhancements, 186.22A and 186.22B. 186.22A punishes the crime of participating in a gang and promoting a felony. 186.22B serves as a sentencing enhancement that imposes additional mandatory prison time when a person carries out a crime for the benefit of a gang. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, prosecutors and gang cops used to apply these gang enhancements for specific crimes in sort of a sweeping standard that would net 30 to 40 gang members. And conspiracy has always been the underlying predicated offense to prove when showing a common goal or an objective. But these days, prosecutors have been successful in making gang enhancements stick for diminutive and paltry acts for things like possessing or getting caught with a BNL, a roster, gang communications, or directives. It's almost scary when you really consider how easy it's become for them to apply these laws, and the criminal courts have become nothing more than the centers and lackeys for them. Whether you're talking about county jails, prisons, regiments, or any other type of Norteño-ran establishments for that matter, the NF has always pushed a hard line. In fact, those who are either familiar with it or who have been a part of it have actually claimed that the NF and their collective probably pushed one of the hardest, if not the hardest lines than all the other groups out there. That's why there's so many DOs from Northern California. They either can't live up to the expectations or they get pushed out because the program is too tough for them. Whenever a Norteño enters a county jail or a prison and he's active, he's required to follow a strict program that consists of stringent household policies, protocols, rules, and regulations that pertain to conduct, decorum, etiquette, etc., etc. Once he becomes a subordinate to that household, he becomes a subordinate of the NF and their leadership. Most NF establishments, households function according to the NF standard set rules and policies. And although some might function a little different, they all pretty much function under the same concept. Here's a quick overview of what the program usually consists of and some of the standard HHPs, household policies, that most households function under. The following are a few HHPs off the top of my head that I personally implemented in some of the households that I overseen myself. 1. All members of the household are required to be suited and booted, usually by 6 a.m. or whatever time the facility opens up the floor. In other words, if you're in a county jail or a prison, you're required to be up, alert, and ready for the day's program at the very first unlock in that facility. Whatever time the floor opens up, unless the inmate's out for their floor exercise time, you're required to be up and alert, wearing whatever shoes the facility provides. 2. Unless they don't provide shoes, shower shoes are not allowed to be worn out on the floor, as this is a breach of security. 3. Sleeping is not allowed during program hours under any circumstances unless you want to write 5,000-word essays like Rojo. 4. Depending on the circumstances, a short cat nap might be allowed if you have a cellie and if the facility has a period of time that it locks down between shifts. This is a short cat nap solely for the purpose to rejuvenate you. In this case, you would have to have a cellie, as you would only be able to take a quick power nap on a rotating schedule where one of you is up and alert at all times. 5. All members are required to conduct themselves like professionals at all times. This means both in actions and in deeds. Horseplaying or fighting between household members isn't allowed at any times. Should a problem arise that cannot be worked out between you and another end, you are required to bring this to your channel's attention so that he can mediate and resolve the issue. 6. All household members are required to always show each other the utmost amount of respect for one another. This also extends to other group segments who we interact with. 7. There is a strict no drug use policy in effect. Anyone caught violating this policy will face serious repercussions. 8. Drinking Pruno wine might be allowed under certain circumstances for social purposes only. However, check with your channel and get clearance first before you do. 9. Anytime you leave the tier, unit, or household for any reason, off-tier movement, you are required to file an OTR off-tier report with your channel immediately upon return. This should detail where you went, who you seen, who you talked to, and anything else of significance that may have happened. 10. In the event you are out of the unit and you run into another northerner, you are to identify yourself, tell him where you're housed, find out who he is, gather his full name, aka his hood, and where he's housed. It is your responsibility to secure any kind of kites, contraband, or weapons that are passed to you from other ends and to immediately turn them over to your channel as soon as you return to the unit. 11. Under no circumstances are you to disrespect, cause any problems, or take it upon yourself to assault the canines. If an issue arises and you encounter an issue with the canine, report it to your channel immediately. Remember, you are a reflection of this household, and what you do as individuals can and will have an adverse effect on the entire household. 12. All members of the household will acknowledge and respect their channels as well as the authority in charge. Directives are not open for debate, period. You have a voice and you're encouraged to use it when you see areas that may need improvement, but this isn't to be interpreted as a means to challenge or undermine the authority in charge. Insubordination will not be tolerated under any circumstances, and anyone who is guilty of this infraction will be dealt with accordingly. 13. All household members are required to maintain their proper hygiene. Take some pride in your personal appearance and your physical well-being. We must be mindful and respectful of our personal quarters by keeping them clean, up to par, and organized. Remember, your cell, area, or living quarters is a direct reflection of you and who you are as an individual. No mustard stains or toothpaste stains are ever to be seen on your top shirt at any time. 14. All household members are required to participate in some type of daily exercise routine for at least 5 days out of the week for no less than an hour and a half a day. Staying physically fit and in shape is something that we must all continue to strive for. All Northerners coming off the streets have 3 weeks maximum to get yourself up to par with the group Máquina. Norteños have 2 weeks maximum to get themselves up to par. And finally, all Familianos have 1 week to get themselves up to par. 15. All household members are required to participate in their assigned class with their assigned maestro. Iglesia will be held for at least 6 days out of the week. We are all mandated to not only take an active interest in furthering our educational endeavors, but this is something that we should all contribute and apply 100% of ourselves to as well. Remember, we are not only striving to become physically strong, but we are also striving to become mentally strong as well. So this is just a quick example. I just came off the top of my head with these, but I'm sure there would be more policies that would be implemented depending on the circumstances and the things related to that facility. So the thing about Monterey County Jail that makes that environment a lot different from other county jails is that this place is usually packed out with a lot of Northerners, Norteños, and NF members. I've only been to that jail twice, but both times I was there, C-Pod had at least 6 to 8 NF members housed in it and dozens of NR members housed throughout the jail. I believe K-Pod was another pod that they used to house active NR and Norteño gang members in. During the relevant time period, in this case at the Monterey County Jail, it was easy to discern that K-Pod was highly organized with bunk beds along the walls, a common bathroom, payphones, and activity tables. In this jail, Norteños received designated housing units separate from the general population because of the predatory nature of Norteños. Nuestra Familia rules are actually supposed to prohibit Norteños from preying on each other, but politics supersede and unseat this. The inmates in D-Pod and J-Pod are housing units with actual jail cells used for higher risk Norteños and NF inmates. The inmates in D-Pod and J-Pod included NF and Norteño leaders who were charged with violent crimes or who otherwise had authority to order acts of violence in custody. So they were separated from inmates who would carry out these orders. Salinas is already a predominantly Hispanic community that's rife with gang-related activity. And like I said in the beginning, the NF presence has always been thick out there. The NF and NR are responsible for committing numerous stabbings, slicings, and removals all over the state of California. Well, now that the NF has metastasized all over the country, you can technically say all over the country. Whether it's in county jails, state prisons, or federal USPs, removals and stabbing those who have fallen in bad favor is just part of the normal everyday job description. Some of these individuals have become targets due to insubordination, breaking policies, misconduct, violating major infractions because they've cooperated with law enforcement, they were PC'd up somewhere else, acts of treason, or turning coward, traitor, or deserter. There's a lot of different reasons for one becoming a target for retribution or because one has been deemed or considered to be no good. Stabbings and assaults are just part of the everyday prison and jail environments. It's part of the culture, and this is how these gangs and criminal organizations cleanse themselves. But this particular profile is about a group of 14 soldados and an NF member who took it to another level by systematically stabbing, slicing, and punishing their own people. Not enemies or the opposition, but instead those who they felt deserved to be stabbed. In fact, stabbings and slicings have become so common and happen with so much frequency that the FBI felt like things have gotten out of control and had escalated to the point of criminal culpability. Once these stabbings had reached a level of criminal culpability, 2 United States federal prosecutors, Claudia Quiroz and Stephen Mayer, pieced together and prosecuted a federal RICO conspiracy case against all those who were involved in these removals. Johnny Soldier Boy Magdaleno, Luis Speedy Romero, Carlos Little Cervantes, Alejo Chino Aligre, Eric Bimbo Lopez, Steven Castro Dorado, Michael Redwood Rice, Alberto Doughboy Moreno, Ramon Little Ray Montoya, Juan Chucky Alvarez, Jeffrey T-Bone Lopez, Jorge Hassel, and 3 others were all convicted and charged with several stabbings, assaults, and gang-related removals. Vincent Chente Garcia was an unindicted co-conspirator in the case. Insubordination, misconduct, breaking HHPs, identifying NGNs who were on the BNL, and those who were formerly housed in protective custody were all reasons for pursuing their targets. It's a mandatory requirement that the NF, NR, and Norteño strongholds all keep updated lists of former members who have fallen out of favor. This is how the gang keeps track of its enemies, and this NA new arrival requirement is used to screen and identify DOs, hermits, and former members who have been targeted. These lists are called BNLs, or bad news lists. Members and associates of the gang refer to the individuals on the bad news list as NGNs, or no good Norteños. The designated leadership in the Monterey County Jail at the time these removals were carried out consisted of Soldier Boy, Speedy, Doughboy, Littles, and Redwood, the guy in the picture with the blown out hair.
And the indictment centers on the 7 attempted murders that took place within the Monterey County Jail.
My understanding is yesterday and today they were moved to federal custody, and where exactly the feds have them, I don't know.
14 members of the Nuestra Familia Salinas Norteño enterprise taken out from Monterey County, an area they considered a stronghold for the gang, according to a federal indictment released Thursday. Their alleged crime spree took place in 2012 and 2013. The indictment claims the men engaged in racketeering for the purpose of preserving the power, territory, reputation, and profits of their gang. Outside of jail, they committed robbery and drug dealing. But once inside jail, they didn't stop looking to expand their influence. They considered the Monterey County Jail a, quote, training ground for new members for their criminal organization. Johnny Soldier Boy Magdaleno was arrested as a result of the gang crackdown in 2013 called Operation Snake Eyes. He committed 2 robberies. He was sent to the Monterey County Jail after committing 2 robberies. He then went on to commit 2 attempted murders, also known as, quote, removals. A removal is when one of the gang members inflicts violence on another prison mate to either kill them or produce as much harm as possible, usually as a result of a gang violation. The indictment alleges the 14 gang members conspired to commit 7 removals altogether. One of the victims stabbed 21 times in the chest and back. In a statement about the indictments, Sheriff Steve Bernal said, quote, we are proud to have partnered with our federal partners on this important investigation that will improve the safety of our entire community. Now, altogether, the investigation included the FBI, the California Department of Corrections, the Salinas Police Department, and the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. Dan, Aaron, back to you.
Christopher, thank you. If convicted, the defendants face up to life in prison.
Soldier Boy pleaded guilty on February 13, 2020 to a RICO conspiracy charge and admitted in his plea agreement to being a member of the Nuestra Familia, Salinas Norteños, known legally as an enterprise. The enterprise consisted of members and associates of the Nuestra Familia prison gang as well as Norteño street gangs in Salinas and the surrounding areas. Norteño gang members pledged their allegiance and loyalty to the Nuestra Familia and are indoctrinated on its rules, rituals, and obligations. Members agree to commit crimes such as murder, narcotics trafficking, and other acts of violence as a pattern of their racketeering activity. Gang rules and discipline are maintained by threatening and assaulting those individuals who violate the gang's rules or who pose a threat to the organization. Inside prisons and local jails, all members and associates of the Nuestra Familia and the Norteños work together to maintain the structure and follow the rules of the enterprise. In this plea agreement, Soldier Boy admitted that while he was in the jail, he conspired with other members to commit murder by approving removals of inmates as a means of enforcing the gang's most important rules. The term removal refers to a weapons-based assault designed to remove from both custodial housing unit and the gang itself a member of the gang who committed a serious violation of the gang's rules. A removal is accomplished by having one or more hitters stab the victim and then having at least 2 bombers assault the target by punching and kicking the victim. The purpose of the subsequent bomber's beating is to inflict maximum injury on the victim while giving the hitter time to wash blood off of themselves and to dispose of the weapon. The objective is always to complete the removal without detection, but in certain scenarios, this isn't always possible. Soulja Boy admitted that during the RICO conspiracy period, he was a high-ranking member of the Norteños group called the NR, Nuestra Raza. In that role, he had the power, authority, and responsibility to authorize removals in the Monterey County Jail. Soulja Boy admitted that while in custody at the Monterey County Jail, he committed the following removals. On December 2, 2012, Soulja Boy orchestrated and directly participated in the removal of an inmate referred to as Victim 1 by stabbing Victim 1 in the chest and back over 20 times. Soulja Boy befriended the victim by talking to him and making him feel like he was an integral part of the collective. As NR members are meticulously taught, Soulja Boy watched the victim out of his peripheral and waited for him to look away in another direction. Preying on the element of surprise and the advantage of ambush, he then began stabbing Victim 1 in the neck, head, face, and upper torso. Immediately thereafter, two bombers punched and kicked the victim to inflict maximum damage and to allow Soulja Boy to escape from being caught with the stabbing weapon by the guards. On February 25, 2013, Soulja Boy orchestrated and directly participated in the removal of Victim 2 by first giving marijuana to the victim so that he would let his guard down, and then stabbing the victim in the head with a shank made from an electrical outlet plate, sharpened into a stabbing instrument. The thing that made Soulja Boy so dangerous is that he was not only a leader, but he was a leader who also led by example. Instead of just falling back and barking orders like a lot of leaders do, Soulja Boy liked to participate and get blood on his hands too. No pun intended. This particular removal was probably one of the most bloodiest and violent of them all. The metal electrical plate that was fashioned into a weapon and used to stab Victim 2 left deep puncture wounds and caused some substantial injuries. The victim's temporal region and the right side orbit area, where the eye is, were deeply punctured and caused what is known as a severe craniocerebral injury. There were also severe perforating skull injuries that caused skull fractures and tiny pieces of the victim's skull to chip off. 3 bombers then punched and kicked the victim to allow Soulja Boy time to take the pedazo away. Soulja Boy then quickly disposed of the weapon and returned to join the bombers in the beating of Victim 2. On April 29, 2013, Soulja Boy orchestrated the removal of Victim 3 by falsely assuring him that he would not be harmed if he returned to his housing pod, and by directing others also to assure the victim of his safety. The victim went for the bait and hook tactic that many ends fall prey to when they have reasons to fear that they might be in trouble. Trying to maintain confidence and faith that they'll continue to be embraced is always the motivating and consequential factor. According to the indictment, they basically pretended to clear Victim 3 so that Victim 3 would let his guard down prior to being removed. During the ensuing removal, Victim 3 was stabbed in the head several times by a hitter using a metal shank, and then he was punched and kicked by 2 bombers to allow the hitter to make his exit strategy. On November 13, 2013, Soulja Boy orchestrated the removal of Victim 6 that resulted in the hitter stabbing Victim 6 in the head, torso, and arms approximately 10 times, while 2 bombers rushed in and got the victim punching and kicking him. On April 14, 2014, Soulja Boy orchestrated and directly participated in the removal of Victim 7 in the Monterey County Jail's main yard by stabbing the inmate in the head and thereafter joining 2 other bombers in punching and kicking the victim. Soulja Boy further admitted to overseeing and actively participating in a narcotics distribution conspiracy within the Monterey County Jail. Whenever you're part of the leadership circle, slinging the household's dope is always part of the job description, and this ends up being the nail in the coffin whenever the feds hit you with the federal conspiracy case. Acts of violence and the commission of another felony will get you stretched out. But in this particular case, Soulja Boy and 14 other Norteño gang members were indicted by the federal grand jury on September 27, 2018. They were charged with 1 count of a RICO racketeering conspiracy in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1962D, 1 count of conspiracy to commit attempted murder in aid of racketeering in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1959A5, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit assault with a dangerous weapon in aid of racketeering in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1959A6. In addition, some of the defendants, but not Soulja Boy, were charged with attempted murder in aid of racketeering in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1959A5 and assault with a dangerous weapon in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1959A3. This was probably the only break he'd catch. Each of the 11 defendants below pleaded guilty to a RICO conspiracy, and their status is as follows. In this indictment, prosecutors say that 2 of the other defendants, Redwood and Doughboy, admitted to selling drugs to inmates at the jail as well as their roles in the removals. Removals are violent attacks designed to expel Norteños or associates out of the gang and its household for not following the rules of the Nuestra Familia, which oversees Norteño activity. In their plea deals, Rice and Doughboy admitted that the attack's ultimate goal is killing the victims. That sounds good, but I'll tell you right now that this terminology is verbiage that the prosecutors use solely for sentencing purposes, because this just ain't the 60s or 70s. What I mean by that is this: the mindset of these gang members that function in this day and age is nothing like it used to be. When these guys get sent on a mission to do a removal, they're not thinking about killing the target or thinking about taking his win. All they're thinking about is removing this individual from their household unit and getting this individual off the tier. Or in even simpler terms, just performing and accomplishing the directive, a removal. The carnales back in the 60s and 70s and even 80s thought about one thing when they were sent to dispatch a target: to kill this motherfucker so that he didn't live to talk about it. These are 2 different generations with 2 entirely different ways of thinking. That's just the bottom line. Redwood also admitted to signing off on 2 such attacks, while Doughboy admitted to participating in a removal in the September 28, 2018 indictment. In the incident, prosecutors laid out the complex hierarchy involving incarcerated Norteños and the prison gang Nuestra Familia, which serves as the leadership of the entire Norteño collective. According to the grand jury indictment, one of the hotbeds for this type of specific activity is the Monterey County Jail. Norteños receive instruction on the rules they must follow while they're housed at the jail as part of a procedure for new arrivals. Minor violations can be punished with additional exercises, hundreds of burpees, writing essays, or paying a monetary fine. More serious transgressions can mean a beatdown, a mollywhopping, or a removal. The indictment indicated that hands-on removals is a form of discipline, but this is simply not true. Having been a former leader myself, I can tell you in good faith that I've never ordered a hands-on removal as a form of discipline. The NF doesn't believe in it, nor did I believe in it myself. When a decision is made to go hands-on and spill your blood, it's because you've been accused of committing a high crime or a serious infraction. It's also been determined that there is absolutely no room for salvage and or redemption. At least that's how it used to be. This might have even changed over the years since they've incorporated buy-ins and buybacks. Another Norteño, fraternizing with enemy. But Norteños also are trained on the removals of fellow Norteños who seriously violate those rules, such as cooperating with authorities, committing sex crimes, trying to drop out, or committing an unsanctioned attack on another Norteño, fraternizing with the enemy or law enforcement officers, etc., etc. That training includes making weapons with available materials and an anatomy chart. The anatomy chart specifies the best points on the body where somebody should be stabbed in order to maximize chances of killing a victim. When Norteños go through the training or indoctrination process, this is referred to as Gray's anatomy. They're also taught how to dispose of the weapons, which fits into the removal stratagem. Essentially, one person acts as a hitter who stabs the target repeatedly. Then a second group, known as bombers, rushes in and begins bombing on the target with their hands and feet. The bombers seek to worsen the stab wounds by opening them up. They also distract the guards with diversionary tactics while the hitter flushes the weapon down the toilet and changes out of his bloody clothes. Removals are for gang members to send a clear message. They're out of the gang and they're not welcome in the gang housing unit. The other underlying message is for the rest of the manpower, that nobody's above the law and that every last one of them is expendable. The Norteños jail leadership is composed of several members, each known as an overall or an OA, who oversee individual housing units. They report to an authority in charge, or an AIC, of the gang throughout the jail. They are involved in almost all removal decisions. Redwood, serving as the overall authority, the OA, for one housing section, allegedly signed off on 2 removals in 2013. On February 25, 2013, Redwood okayed the attack on an inmate identified only as Victim 2 because he'd allegedly been in protective custody. According to the indictment, Soldier Boy and Littles then gave the victim marijuana to get him high and thus facilitate the attack. This is another disarming tactic that Norteños are taught to use that's analogous to giving the target pruno or a drug cocktail. This was the incident where Soldier Boy then stabbed him in the head and face using a parazo fashioned from an electrical outlet plate. 2 months later, Redwood approved another removal in the same housing unit, and Doughboy participated in the attack. Victim 3 had been in another housing unit, but Soldier Boy told him he would not be harmed if he returned to the Norteño wing, known as K-Pod. But it was a ruse. The victim was placed in protective custody by the facility's classification gang intel officers after they received information that he may have been in bad standings with the NF. After the victim crossed paths with Doughboy in the jail's visiting room, he expressed that he had been forcibly placed in PC and that he wanted to return to the fold. After the initial contact was made, it's alleged that the inmates in K-Pod continued to communicate with the victim in an effort to make him feel at ease and for the sole purpose of luring him back into the trap that they were setting. Soldier Boy continued to work on luring the victim back because he'd allegedly dropped out of the Norteño gang and had been in protective custody. The victim returned to K-Pod and was put through the normal procedures for new arrivals to make sure they're in good standings with the gang. The victim seemed to clear that process, but gang leadership had ordered the removal to be conducted with 2 hitters so that Victim 3 would leave in a body bag. This was a submersive phrase prosecutors used to support the attempted murder charge, but the plans changed because a second weapon wasn't readily available. Instead, on April 29, 2013, Little Weddle stabbed and slashed the victim's head, hands, arms, and wrist. According to the indictment, the victim sustained substantial injuries and dozens of stitches. Doughboy and 2 others acted as the bombers, kicking and punching the victim as he lay on the ground. When they stopped, Redwood allegedly told them to continue attacking the victim. Both victims survived and were then placed in protective custody. The grand jury indictment lists 5 other such attacks, ranging in victims from a gang member being in custody on a rape charge to another using some methamphetamine meant for sale to other inmates to profit the Norteños. Redwood and Doughboy also admitted to helping distribute drugs to other jail inmates. In the indictment, prosecutors described how the gang brought drugs inside the system by using anal cavities to smuggle them in. This undesirable method of concealing and transporting contraband is called keystering, or packing out the trunk. Then the drugs would be sold to non-gang members. Redwood is also the brother of Tammy Huntsman, who pleaded out to charges she tortured 3 children, killing 2 of them alongside her then 17-year-old boyfriend, Gonzalo Quirio. Both were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole after being convicted. Prosecutors said Redwood and Doughboy acknowledged that the murder was a goal of the conspiracy. Redwood received 13 years and Doughboy was ultimately sentenced to 7 years under the plea deals. In January 2015, one of the men also identified by prosecutors in the indictment, Vincent Chente Garcia, received 35 years to life in prison for his role as a Nuestra Familia leader for 2 prior strikes for attempted murder and burglary. He was among 47 people arrested during Operation Snake Eyes in May 2013. According to the Monterey County District Attorney's Office, Soldier Boy was also referenced in the federal indictment as Garcia's right-hand man. Eric Bimbo Lopez faced additional federal charges of conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering, conspiracy to commit assault with a dangerous weapon in aid of racketeering, and being a felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition. Another unindicted co-conspirator, Jorge Hassel, was reported as being kidnapped from his Soledad home last year. Hassel was additionally later charged with conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering and conspiracy to commit assault with a dangerous weapon in aid of racketeering. This stemmed from his participation in some of the removals and in a federal indictment with NF leader Chente.
Back here on the Central Coast, new information on a Soledad man kidnapped during a home invasion on Monday. Action News is learning 26-year-old Jorge Hasso was at one time a Norteño gang member. He is one of 14 people charged with federal racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. And even with the new information, police are still searching for answers on who took him.
It was not a crime of opportunity by any means. It was targeted. It was early morning, and I think that people knew that the victim was at home at that time.
Also learning Hasso was scheduled to reappear in federal court the same day he went missing. Action News reporter Christopher Salas has more.
Now, according to court documents, Hasso was not put in custody following his initial appearance. And I did speak with the defense attorney yesterday, who is not related to this case, but he told me that's slightly unusual that he was released, especially when we're talking about these type of charges.
It would be unusual to have an own recognizance release on serious conspiracy and racketeering charges.
But that's what happened to Jorge Hasso. According to court documents, Hasso was the only one released on his own recognizance following a court hearing on October 11th. Just 11 days later, he was taken from his Soledad home the same day he was scheduled for a bond hearing. Worthington said although it's unusual to release someone on such serious charges, it's not unheard of. A judge would consider it under the right conditions.
It would start with the person's culpability for the offense. Was he one of the primary actors in the alleged conspiracy, or was he a peripheral actor?
Hasso, along with 13 other alleged gang members, are facing life in prison, accused of racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder for the purposes of enhancing the power of the Norteño street gang, and doing it all from the Monterey County Jail.
Everything we see in the community has the potential of taking place inside that jail.
According to the affidavit, Hasso and the gang saw the jail as a training ground for new recruits and a home base for their enterprise.
So what we try and do is keep the identified gang members together, but away from the rest of the general population.
The affidavit says the gang was housed together in what's called the K-Pod. That's where Hasso and others allegedly enforced the rules. And if those rules were broken, gang members would call for removals, stabbing victims as punishment. Soledad police say they would not comment on Hasso's gang involvement or the indictment, but only that they're working with the FBI to make sure he's found. Now, Soledad police did say there was a security camera at Hasso's home during the time of the kidnapping. No word yet on if there's any evidence there. If found, Hasso does face life in prison. Reporting from Salinas, I'm Christopher Salas, KSBW Action News 8 Sunrise.
The Monterey County Jail in the city of Salinas is considered by Nuestra Familia as one of the main training grounds for the new Nuestra Familia members. This is due to the high population of Norteño street gang members and Nuestra Raza members within the jail population. Because of the importance that Nuestra Familia places on Monterey County, and Salinas in particular, Monterey County is a stronghold, a home base for the gang. As I've said in many of my prior profiles and past spills, the Salinas and Monterey County area is rich and grandiose with Nuestra Familia history dating all the way back to the 60s and 70s. It also continues to be the embodiment and the paragon for the birth and creation of the Cesar Chavez movement. One of the NF's most influential and prominent members, such as Michael M.C. Castillo, was born and raised in Salinas. Other notable NF members from Salinas that I personally worked with over the years were Larry Paki Amaro, Matthew Mateo Rocha, Robert Bubba Hanrahan, Juan Wino Gallegos, Gabe G. Money Caracheo, Robert Chico Rose, Daniel Stork Perez, Albert Bird Laris, Vincent Chente Garcia, Salvador Littleman Castaneda, Jaime Smokey Rodriguez, Hector Copas Gallegos, Armando Suave Heredia, Roque Boxer Martinez, Paul Powder Killinger, and Patrick Chino Smith are just a few to name. Unfortunately, by either way of NF politics or federal indictments with several strokes of a proverbial paintbrush, all these brothers mentioned above have been painted in the books of the Nuestra Familia's robust history. Operation Black Widow, Operation Valley Star, Operation Snake Eyes, and Operation Knockout are just a few of the federal investigations that have all been targeted, conducted, and crippling on Salinas. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. We have some other good projects coming up soon, and we're getting ready to launch our new channel that will have new exclusive content. So if you haven't subscribed to Paradigm Entertainment Productions, subscribe now and continue to support us. Also, FYI, when you guys watch a video or check out any of our content, take 1 second out to hit the thumbs up button. We promise it won't cost you nothing and it's absolutely free. It helps our channel grow by expanding our platform to a bigger audience. So if you guys really want to support us, start hitting that thumbs up. Get your questions in now for our next Q&A. And for all you book listeners, we already started Blue Rage Black Redemption by Tookie. Once Blood in the Fields is done, we'll either start The Hot House, Life Inside Leavenworth Prison, or Thug Life by Senyika Shakur, or Operation Devil Horns by Michael Santini.